Alright, so Jon Favreau has just answered a question which Star Wars fans have been asking pretty much since this movie was first announced. Why is The Mandalorian and Grogu the first Star Wars movie in 7 years? Now the real reason, which I don't think anyone at the studio would admit, is that after 2019, Lucasfilm found itself in a very strange situation. Obviously the global you-know-what changed and delayed a lot of plans, Disney Plus was really picking up, it started with Mando, then a bunch of other spin-offs, and on the movie side of things, this is when we kept hearing the phrase, creative differences, so many cancellations. And while this was a period of time where Lucasfilm was going all in on the TV shows, they were still putting plans in place for their future movies. And as we learned a year ago, it wasn't just the ones we knew about. In October, Adam Driver shocked the world when he said, along with Steven Soderbergh, he was developing a movie that was going to be set after Episode 9, titled The Hunt for Ben Solo, a cancelled Star Wars movie being developed around the time of the pandemic, which absolutely no one knew anything about. Then they were hoping that Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron would be the first movie, then that fell by the wayside, and before you know it, 3 new Star Wars movies were announced, and none of them, to this day, have come to fruition. A year later, they then decide to put The Mandalorian on the big screen, but not in the form of Dave Filoni's so-called Heir to the Empire adaptation, anything to do with Ahsoka or Thrawn, but in the form of a 2-hour mission titled The Mandalorian and Grogu. But Jon Favreau, in a new interview with Games Radar Plus, said this: "I'm not sure why we were asked to do this. I suspect it was because these characters that people, even who hadn't seen Star Wars, may be aware of, especially Grogu. Baby Yoda was everywhere, and these are 2 characters that were used to launch Disney Plus. And we made no assumptions when the Mandalorian TV show came on that anybody had seen any Star Wars before." So look, my take is this: bless Jon Favreau for his contributions to Star Wars. I mean, sure, it's not all been great, but without him there wouldn't be any of the good Mando, which we love, there probably wouldn't be a general Mandoverse, and that includes Skeleton Crew, which I love. And what I've gathered from these comments and something he said the other night in London is that, as a concept, The Mandalorian and Grogu and the way it turned out was not his idea. It was at a time they were trying to kind of phase out the TV shows because viewership had declined and they weren't sure what to do next. The Rey movie kind of fell apart. It went through so many different writers, and we recently learned that the strikes really held it back. James Mangold was far too busy working on other projects, and for whatever reason they didn't go with Filoni's film. He wanted Ahsoka Season 2 to come first, and so it was Kathleen Kennedy's idea to contact Jon, ask him to write a few scripts, separate to the Season 4 treatments, by the way, my friends, and that's how it came about. It kind of reeks of desperation in many ways. I know they're proud of it and I'm sure it's going to be a fun flick, but to act as if this was always in the plans and this was the Mandalorian movie they envisioned from the word go is not being fully honest. Now, did you notice when Jon Favreau mentions the popularity of Grogu, he uses the past tense? He says, quote, "Baby Yoda was everywhere." And don't get me wrong, Grogu is still super popular with Star Wars fans, but not as popular as he was a few years ago. And inadvertently, Jon Favreau is acknowledging this. In other Mando news, my friends, I'm sure this is going to spark some interesting reactions, but I want to talk about some new comments from Kathleen Kennedy. She might have stepped down as Lucasfilm president, but she's still working as a producer on upcoming Star Wars films, and Mando was one of them. I'm sure we're going to hear her Star Wars takes for many years to come.
Oh, goody.
She was asked about the phone call to Martin Scorcese to convince him to play an alien in this film. And just to show you how much pull Kathleen Kennedy has in Hollywood, it wasn't a very difficult phone call at all. Martin said yes pretty much straight away. He was over the moon to be a part of this. And like I say, it shows you the kind of power Kathleen Kennedy has had in Hollywood for so many decades. Here is the full clip, and then we'll talk about Ahsoka Season 2.
You know, I wish I could say that it was really, really difficult. But in fact, I think Marty Scorsese is a huge fan. Consequently, when I called him, he didn't really miss a beat. He was like, oh, I would love to do that. And I wanted to make it sound like it was much more difficult, but he was a huge fan, and consequently, you can see he has a blast.
So moving on to Ahsoka, my friends, we've got some pretty promising updates, and Dave Filoni was asked a few pressing questions about what we can expect. And one of the major things he addresses is the fan rumor that Ahsoka Season 2 is going to be the final season. I don't know where this originated because Lucasfilm never really confirmed it, but I think it has to do with an array of different circumstances surrounding the show and fan assumptions. The prevailing fan logic, if you remember, is that we're getting 2 seasons of the TV show, and that is setting up Dave Filoni's big, Thrawn-centric movie. And even Filoni himself contributed to the speculation. At Celebration in Japan a year ago, he said he's already worked on the opening scene of the film. He already knows where the Ahsoka show is going to end and where things are going. And because he explicitly stated he's starting to map out his film, I think fans saw it as a given that Ahsoka is only getting 2 seasons. But let's be honest, in the last year, a lot has changed. Dave Filoni became co-president of Lucasfilm, the future direction of the franchise is a big question mark, some of those Kathleen Kennedy plans might have been scrapped, and we've been hearing so many rumors that in spite of Lucasfilm going back to the big screen, there are still plans in place for future live-action Disney Plus TV shows. So the future of the Mandoverse is up in the air. It's not necessarily coming to an end. A lot of it will be down to the Mandalorian and Grogu's box office. But in the meantime, Dave Filoni doesn't want to rule out the possibility of more seasons of Ahsoka. He begins by saying he might know when season 2 releases, but he's not going to clarify when. And then he says, "You never know. Everything works out as planned, and I know where the story goes and where it should tie up. So I'm not really worried about that." And he's talking about fan speculation that we're only getting 2 seasons. And then he says, "It's always fun to hear what people think, but we've got a lot going on right now in the present." So a very Dave Filoni kind of answer. And while Dave is the kind of person who likes to map everything out, he's got his story treatments and drawings, a vague kind of roadmap for where things are headed for the characters, I bet even he doesn't know at this stage. We've heard so many conflicting reports about his movie being shelved, if we're getting more seasons of The Mandalorian itself. So with Ahsoka, I guess, it depends on the viewership and how season 2 is received. And I have to be honest, I've seen way more buzz for Ahsoka Season 2 than I have for The Mandalorian and Grogu, which by the way comes out next week. Oh, how time flies. And Ahsoka Season 2 is promising fans quite a lot. Balin's journey, surprises with the New Republic, Ahsoka's evolution, more Anakin, rumors of Obi-Wan, Abeloth, Padme flashbacks. If Dave has worked his magic, this could be something very special and a huge win for Lucasfilm. Fingers crossed. So then Dave is asked for an update, and he says this: "I'm working on it. I'm editing all the episodes at once, and now we're deep in visual effects, but really proud of the entire team and the work they've put in. Lots of things to resolve and figure out, but that's normal. And I'm excited for people to see it. You know, we didn't really get to go out and premiere in a way last time, so I think the team's really excited to be out there with the fans on this one, and to see how it goes." And what Dave is talking about are the strikes back in 2023. From the sounds of things, Dave is confirming that this time round, there's going to be a bigger marketing campaign, more promotions, and a proper big premiere. So that's basically what Dave said, and I think he's playing it very coy in terms of what he can reveal at this stage. If we are getting some kind of imminent announcement, then it makes sense that he wants to wait for the official channels to spread the word, to give us a release date and any further information. But with the current state of Star Wars, it's always very interesting to me to see what fans are really excited about. Like I said, I've noticed a big difference between how fans react to any Ahsoka news versus even big reveals for The Mandalorian and Grogu. I know there are lots of fans who are very excited, I'm not trying to deny that, but we've had some pretty crazy updates in the last few days, and very few fans seem to genuinely care. I'm talking about things like Sigourney Weaver's comments about possibilities of original trilogy cameos. She said, "There's no Chewbacca," which was a character she wanted in the film, but she said there are surprises in her squadron and some Star Wars characters we haven't seen in a very long time. But for Ahsoka Season 2, anytime there is the wildest of rumors, be it about Balin or Obi-Wan or the Padme stuff, that's spoken about for a good few days. And yet, it's still a good few months away. Lucasfilm hasn't even started marketing it. I know they've got a very different target audience, they're 2 very different projects, but Star Wars fans want stories where they feel like there is somewhere to go. Ahsoka's first season set up some huge things with Anakin, with Balin, with Thrawn back in the known galaxy, Ezra's back. We're dying to know what's gonna happen next.